Brahma Gururvishnu Gururdevo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha Twameva Vedyadravidam Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So why don't you sit close?
Jim.
Did you say something, Mark?
Yeah, Ganesha signed on.
Hari Om Ganesh.
Hari Om, Jim.
Hey.
Yeah, I had talked to Puneet, so he said he wasn't going to be able to make it.
No, and neither he nor Sound. We were going to suffer in English. So what verse are we on tonight?
We're on verse 335.
335. And what's our heading that we're discussing?
In the one, no plurality.
Yes, yes. So the idea that Shankara's been working on is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Brahman alone is. There's no otherness. There's not God plus a phenomenal world. What we see as the phenomenal world is, in fact, Brahman. One of the definitions of mithya, we have our saying, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, is it's defined by some people as conditioned reality. So, for example, clay is the reality, cup is the conditioned reality. Still clay, but it takes a form. But what Shankara is going to start working on here now, is the world ever really created? And most importantly, is there an individual entity? You can call it Jivatman, you can call it Purusha, you can call it Ahankriti, you can call it Chidabhasa, but is the personality a real thing? And does it then undergo a change to become one with Brahman? And what Shankara is working on here now is what we call the doctrine of ajati, unborn. The self undergoes no change. The spiritual life is not an ontological transformation. You don't start off as a miserable worm of a creature and you become a Superman. No. Now, at the level of this worldly existence, a human being has many, many more capacities than we normally think, but they're still finite. I had a student once who read a book about these great yogis in the Himalayas who raise the Kundalini. They bring it up to the crown chakra, the top of the head. They live for 400 years. I want that. I said, well, first thing, you know you're going to have to give up having sex because all that energy has to be transmuted. Oh. And then I asked, what happens at year 401? You're still dead. But the self is birthless, changeless, and deathless. Our problem is epistemological. I do not know that there is no plurality, there's no difference, no distinction. We come to see that this individuality is a seeming. It's like hypnosis. It's like the dream body and ego. Certainly perceived, never deny that, but not real. But something there is, the ground of all that. It's very real. All right, will you help us out, please, Ganesh?
Bahyanusandhi परिवर्धयेत् फलं दुर्वासनामेव ततस्तदोधिकाम् ज्ञात्वा विवेकै परिहृत्य बाह्यं स्वात्मानुसन्धिम् विदधीत नित्यम्. Constant contemplation upon the external objects will only gather up its fruits, enhancing the evil propensities which grow from bad to worse. Knowing this through discrimination, one should leave the thoughts of external objects and constantly apply oneself to meditation on the self.
So, again, we are entering into advanced teaching. So at this point, what Shankar is saying is, don't worry about the world. God's in charge. Don't worry about your body, mind, intellect. Your own product will take care of it. You don't need to change what you're doing. Right where you are. It will change when it's supposed to change. Leave off our concern for people, places, things, and conditions. Turn the mind in. As frequently as you can, remember self-nature. Tune up the mind. Drown the mind in the self. I can remember when I was in the ashram, there was this one woman, Marlena. She was very deep. And one of the projects that we had was refinishing furniture. And Ram ran a used furniture store, a little antique shop. And this gal, Marlena, was working on the drawers to this dresser. And she was all tuned up in meditation. And she had the power sander. And she was just going, she sanded all the way through the drawer. Well, not a fit. She was so empty. She didn't care. So he's yelling at her. She just let it pass through. Nothing touch us. Keeping the mind intensely introverted. Now, if we get sloppy, we start thinking about the external objects, desire will arise. Then we're going to start acting on it. And then Maya, fear. Fear that I'm not going to get what I want. Fear that I'm going to lose it once I get it. All the tribulations of the mind continue to arise. And here the translation is evil propensities. Another way to look at it is the painful propensities. There's no cosmic Supreme Court that says that was an evil thing you thought. Remember, we're not punished for our sins. We are punished by them. Mind extroverts, we will suffer. Nisargadatta Maharaj says, worldly pleasure and worldly suffering are the same thing. They're like the heads and tails of a coin. They always go together. Next verse.
Bahye niruddhe manasa prasannata mana prasade paramatma darshanam tasmin sudrushte bhavabandhanasho bahir nirodha padavi vimukte. When the objective world is shut out, the mind becomes quiet, and in the quiet mind arises the vision of the Paramatman. When that is perfectly realized, the chains of births and deaths is broken. Hence, the chain of births and deaths is broken. Hence, the shutting out of the external world is the initial step for reaching liberation.
And so we can interpret this shutting out of the external world in two ways. The first, in our meditation seat. We had these practices way back in the beginning of Shama, Dhamma, and Uparati, the sense withdrawal. But then Shankara says the best Uparati is when the sense objects don't create any vrittis in the mind. Meditation is like snake in the rope. When I apprehend the rope, the snake is no longer available for perception. But here, the more complete understanding is like mirage waters in the desert. Here, the yogi functions in the world with the firm conviction, Sarvamaya, Sarvamana. It's all Maya. It's all dreamlike. It's all a hologram. It's all Brahman. It's all bliss. He doesn't let the mind externalize and rub all over the objects. Now, when we students were starting to get to this level of our practice, Swamiji could sense it. And he would scoop us up. He would keep those people who are in this particular level close to you. If we would deviate from the self, poke, there's nothing more important. Yasa Vairagya practice tense renunciation rooted in insight. Now, what will frequently happen when the sadhak is at this level of their practice? The deck's clear in life. All of a sudden, you have the free time to spend in sadhana. The universe will take care of you, because there's nothing more precious to the Lord than his devotee, as Gita says. I look back, when you get old like me, you get these printouts from Social Security. I guess it starts in your 50s, doesn't it?
I think so, Raven.
Where you get every year how much money you made.
Yep.
I look at mine in those years I was doing sadhana in the ashram, zero, $145, zero, 1,200, zero. You know, no visible means of support. How did I do it? I don't know. The universe just took care of me. I never paid for a camp. Someone else always did. I never bought a book. They just came to me. You may have a spouse who's willing to work while you do sadhana. You may get an inheritance. I have one student. He's about ready to sell his business for $75 million. It's a young man. And he wants to do sadhana. Lord set him up for it. Because it takes time and space to do this work. It can be done while you're holding down a 40, 50, 60 hour a week job, but it's much harder. This is why the scriptures extol sannyas. There's nothing magical about wearing the orange cloth. You don't get a gold star from God. What it means is, if you leave the world to do this work, it's more easier. It isn't more holy. God doesn't love you more. Now, too frequently, someone says, I'm going to give up my worldly life to do sadhana. They give up the worldly life. They go live in the ashram, and they're running the newspaper and putting out the administrative work for this and taking care of the kitchens. And in other words, the busyness follows them. So it's when we get silent inside, these ships happen. Not always, but they do. I always think of my friend Vilasini. She decided to go off to India. I think she was 18, took the course in Sandipani. It was really deep. So Swamiji said, you come be my personal secretary. She traveled around the world with him for 2.5 years. Yes, she had tasks to do. But her main task was to be in meditation. Next verse.
Kah pandita sansada sadviveki shruti pramana paramarthadarshi janan hi kuryadasato valambam swapata heto shishuvan mumukshu. Where is the real, where is the man, sorry, where is the man who, being learned, able to discriminate between the real and the unreal, believing the Vedas as authority, fixing his gaze upon the Atman, the supreme reality, and being a seeker after liberation, will, like a child, consciously run after the unreal, which will surely cause his fall?
So last week we talked about the fallen yogis. And here Shankara talks about it. What happens is there's a stage where what we say is true. In the end, there are no rules for the yogi. Doesn't matter what you do. But if you then think, well, that means I can do anything I want. Let's go do drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you may find yourself becoming attached to the world. and then suffering by getting food. The mark of the man of wisdom is his mind doesn't extrovert into the world. Now, for some of us, we get to a particular stage in our unfoldment. It's very clear we've got worldly business we've got to work out. No blame, proud of them. So we go do it till we don't have to do it anymore. And then when it's over, we pick up our sadhana again. It's a little bit different. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Dehadi samsiktamato na mukti muktasya dehadya bhimatya bhava suptasya no jagaranam na jagrata swapnastayor bhinna gunashrayatvat. There is no liberation for him who is attached to the body, etc. And the liberated man has no identification with his body, etc. The sleeping man is not awake, nor is the waking man asleep, for these two states are contradictory in nature.
Yes. So just like the distinction between waking and sleeping, if I'm awake, I have no concern about the relationships of the dream state of the night before. If I'm sound asleep and I'm dreaming, all the issues of the waking state are not available. Now, the distinction between being identified with the ego in the waking state and knowledge is just as much a shift in identification. And for the man of realization, there's no effort of discrimination. The discrimination is natural. So, Mike, you're there on the couch. Do you see the bowl on the coffee table?
Yes.
Are you a bowl?
No.
Is there any effort in knowing that?
No.
It's the most obvious thing in the world. The bowl is over there. So also for the man of realization. The body, mind, intellect is out there, object of cognition. It's not self. He no longer needs to practice that discrimination. For the rest of us, we have jnana abhyasa, the practice of knowledge. When the mind extroverts into the world and I start getting disturbed by this, that, and the other thing, bring it back. When a personal sense of self arises, what am I going to do about this? What I should have done there? Drop it. Om Namah Shivaya. Over and over and over. Till all of the vasanas are annihilated. Next one.
Spiritual growth, the secret. Antarbahishvam sthirajangameshu Jnatvatmanadharataya vilokya Tyaktakhilopadpadhirakhandarupa Purnatmanaya sthita esha mukta. That man is free who, knowing the self through his mind in all moving and unmoving objects, and observing it as their substratum, renounces all superimpositions and remains as the absolute and infinite self.
Yes. So, who am I? What is this world? How has it come about? Aham Brahmasmi. I am that partless Brahman. I'm ever the witness. I'm not the body, not the mind, not the intellect, not the ego sense. What is this world? The names and forms are mithya, illusory. It's all just the play of consciousness. It all comes about by imagination. There's nothing real out there. Keep the mind absorbed in the self. I'm always fond of going through the brief biographies we have of Ramana Maharshi. So he starts to contemplate death because a chum at school had died. So he lies down on the floor at home and asks who dies, and attains self-realization in about half an hour. But then there's an interesting period. He lost all concern for school, for family. He sells his earrings. In those days, Brahmins in Tamil Nadu had gold earrings. He sold those, got a train ticket, just was drawn to this mountain, Arunachala. But for 11 years, he started off just living in the crypt underneath the temple in Tiruvannamalai. He was in silence. The biographies call it seeming toughness. Engaged in this perpetual immersion of the mind itself. Just wearing a loincloth, dependent on what the priests there in the temple would bring him for food. Eventually, he moved to the hill. Arunachala, lived in a cave. But he did 11 years of practicing this deep immersion in the self, in silence. This was a human being who had done a great thing. And the fragrance of his realization is still there. You go to the ashram at Arunachala, you go into the meditation hall that they built. The couch is still there. I think it's still there. You were there more recently, Ganesh. Do they still have the couch that he used to lie on there in the meditation hall?
Yeah.
And then his samadhi stall is there in the middle, if I remember, where they dug a hole and put him in the ground. But there's still a lot of Shakti there. So the fragrance of his deep, deep immersion in the self is still there. This is what Shankara is inviting us to practice. Next verse.
सर्वात्मता बन्धविमुक्तहेतुः सर्वात्मभावान्न परोऽस्ति कश्चित् दृश्यागृहे सत्युपपद्यते सौ सर्वात्मभावोऽस्य सदात्मनिष्ठया. To recognize the entire universe as a self is the means of release from all sense of bondage. There is nothing higher than realizing the universe as a self. One realizes this state by excluding the objective world through steadfastness in the eternal Atman.
Yeah. Paradoxically, how do I see the entire universe as the self? Withdraw my fixation from the names and forms. Right now, my mind says this is joy giving, this is misery producing. I want this, I don't want that. Or if I have it, I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. This extroverts the mind. Shankara says, keep it introverted. Keep it tuned up. Revel in the sound. Watch. Do your duty. Don't get involved. Next verse.
दृश्यस्याग्रहणं कथं न घट दृश्यस्याग्रहणं कथं न नुघटते देहात्मना तिष्ठतो बाह्यार्थानुभव प्रसक्तमनसस्तत्क्रियाः कुर्वत संन्यस्ताखिलधर्मकर्म विषयैः नित्यात्मनिष्ठापरैः तत्त्वज्ञैः करणीयमात्मनि सदानन्दे क्षमुभिर्यत्नतः. How is the exclusion of the objective world possible for him who lives identified with the body, whose mind is attached to the perception of external objects, and who performs various acts for that end? This exclusion should carefully be practiced by sages who have renounced all kinds of duties and actions and objects, who are passionately devoted to the eternal Atman, and who wish to possess undying absolute bliss.
Yes. So, as long as we're identified with the body and we're dependent on the external world for our joy, no blame. But here Shankara says, if you want the pearl of great price, it's not about going and living in a cave. It's about withdrawing the mind into the self. Now, this samadhi, this deep introversion, later on in other texts, you're going to hear Guru say, you must renounce the bliss of samadhi. If we're foolish, we go nuts to the samadhi business, I don't need that. I'll just go ahead and just extrovert into the world because it's not real. Doesn't matter really what I do. That's fine. But you can't renounce something you haven't lost. Get established in this. Then let go of your attachment to it. Let me share with you out of my direct experience. I've met more than one Swami who is well versed in the scripture, and they're very nice persons. And I've had the great grace of meeting a Mahatma. And we're in the presence of these people. It's different. You can have it. It's your own self. And the only price tag is my willingness to give up my misery. Oh, but I love my misery. Such is the power of Maya. Next verse.
सर्वात्म सिद्धये भिक्षो कृतश्रवणकर्मणः समाधिं विदधात्येषा शान्तोदान्त इति श्रुतिः. To the sannyasin who has listened to the discourses upon the scriptures, who has cultivated calmness, self-control, etc., to him the Shruti prescribes samadhi for realizing that the whole universe is the self, Sarvatma Siddhi.
Now, we're entering into a section that is frankly controversial. As I mentioned in the last verse, there are particular Vedantins who think this whole teaching about samadhi is unnecessary. And you may ascribe to that school. Every man, woman works this out for themselves. I can only tell you, in the old-timey days, Swamiji was traveling all over the world doing his jnana yajnas. And he would designate a subordinate, another Swami from the Chinmaya mission, to teach the 2.5-year brahmachari training course in Mumbai. But at the end of that training course, he would have all of that class of brahmacharis come up to Siddhavati in the foothills of the Himalayas. And of course, other people were welcome too. I had the great privilege of being able to do this text with him in 1988. I can't remember how long that was, about 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. We did several classes a day. And Swamiji would always teach Vivekachudamani himself. And he didn't skip over this section. Shankara teaches it, and Swamiji personally taught it. Not only that, he lived it. He was a great Mahatma. And when you were in his presence, feel it. His mind was deeply absorbed in the sound. So samadhi, the etymology that I have found most useful is sama, equal, the mind, the absolute quiescence of mind. And here he's going to talk in this text about two samadhis. Sa vikalpa samadhi and near vikalpa samadhi. A vikalpa is a perturbation, a movement in mind. So sa vikalpa samadhi is this state. In our tradition, we call it tuning up the mind. When the mind is absolutely quiescent, deeply introverted, while I have the perception of objects. Now, in this state, this is where we snip all those vasanas, all those attachments and identifications. When the last attachment has been renounced, let go, the mind slips into nirvikalpa samadhi. Shankara is going to say practice nirvikalpa samadhi. In a sense, we can't. We can only really practice savikalpa samadhi. It's like saying practicing sleeping. You can't really practice sleeping. All you can practice is getting sleepy. Take your melatonin, drink your warm milk, put on your jammies, do whatever you do, fluff your pillow, get into bed. And if you've been successful at practicing being sleepy, you slip into sleep. If you continue to practice this intense introversion at an auspicious moment, the mind will slip into nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa samadhi is that state, it's a mind state of no mind. The individuality is gone, the perception of the world is gone. The scriptures say the distinction between knower, knowing, and known is completely gone. Meaning the world disappears, but you remain. It is timeless, like sleep is. I don't know about you, but many a time I'll awaken in the middle of the night. I have no idea what time it is. Have I been asleep for an hour? Have I been asleep for 4 or 5 hours? In samadhi, there's no time. Returning from samadhi, all doubt is gone. That personal sense of self is gone. It never comes back. You know, you're not a person. You never were. And that discrimination that was so difficult, oh, the self and the not self, it's not for her. All of a sudden, it all seems like it's 10 miles away. It's the most obvious thing in the world. But you are not the body, not the mind. For some people, it's this thunderous experience. I have come to see for others, it can be just a click, a shift. So there's a trap that we need to address before we move into this section. Do not make nirvikalpa samadhi another object of desire. The more you crave it and long for it, the more it will recede. Focus instead on, do I know who I am? And continue to renounce. All right, with this in mind, let's go on to the next verse.
Arudhashakterahamo vinasha kurtanna shakya sahasapi panditai ye nirvikalpakhya samadhi nischala tanantarananta bhavahi vasana. Even wise men find it impossible to suddenly destroy the ego once it has become strong, except for those who have become perfectly calm through nirvikalpa samadhi. Indeed, desires are the effects of innumerable births.
So these vasanas, as long as they continue, I will still have little threads of I'm a person. You can go through a stage where you feel, okay, I can feel like I'm the witness, but it feels like I'm an individual witness. I don't get the connection that the self in me is the self in all. Keep tuning up the mind. Keep snipping away attachment and identification. Swamiji used to use the metaphor. Then the mind is like a helium balloon tied down by millions of these little threads of vasana. You just snip and snip and snip and snip. Never know when it's the last one. But when it happens, what happens to the balloon rises and expands, and all of a sudden, kabloom! falls down. Whole world is gone. The person is gone. There's no longer a practice of discrimination. Now, Shankara doesn't address it, but what I want to talk about now is what's called Jada Samadhi. Jada means inert. So the Hatha yogis who have not renounced vasana, but will do extreme pranayama, they huff and puff and huff and puff, they'll get to a point where the mind will stop for a second. They might even be very euphoric. But the state is, I, Jim, see nothing. The personal sense of self still remains. It will remain as long as there's vasana. What's the first power of a vasana? Avarana Shakti, veiling power, the non-apprehension of myself is Brahman. How do I know I have vasana? I think I'm a person. Vivekachudamani Shakti. So this intense introversion of the mind and let go, let go, let go. Next verse.
Aham buddhyaiva mohinya yojayitva prater balat vikshepa shakti purusham vikshepayati tadgunaih. The projecting power, through the aid of the veiling power, confuses the man with storms of egoistic ideas and distracts him through the attributes of that agitation.
So first there's the Avarana Shakti, the veiling power, then the Vikshepa Shakti. What does the mind project? Only three ideas are important to pay attention to. One, I think I'm a person. Two, I have a goal. The goal only takes one of two forms. I either need to do something in the outer world in order to be happy, or I need to change me in order to be happy, the person. Third element, kartavya, obligatory action. I struggle from point A to point B, whatever. That's the Vikshepa Shakti. As long as that's going on, samadhi will not be there. This is why it's a trick. You can't make samadhi another object of desire. I, Jim, really want to have nirvikalpa. I want it. And you do all this extreme stuff. And it won't come that way. Do not the mind. Forget the world. Forget the personal sense of self. Be empty. In your meditation, see, not 10 minutes a day, not 20, not 30, but maybe an hour. or maybe 2 hours. Continuing to unload the unconscious. All of us. Next verse.
विक्षेपशक्तिविजयो विषमो विधातुं निशेषमावरणशक्तिनिवृत्त्या निवृत्त्यभावे दृग्दृश्ययो स्फुटपयो जलवद्भिविभागे नश्ये तदावरणमात्मनि च स्वभावात् निस्संशयेन भवति प्रतिबन्धशून्यो विक्षेपणां न हि तदा यदि मृषार्थे. It is extremely difficult to conquer the projecting power unless the veiling power is perfectly rooted out. And that covering over the Atman naturally vanishes when the subject is perfectly distinguished from the objects like milk from water. But the victory is undoubtedly complete and it becomes free from all obstacles when there is no oscillation of the mind due to the false sense objects.
So we're back to being Adhikari, a fit student. It still always goes back to Viveka Vairagya. What is Viveka? That firm conviction in the intellect that Brahman, myself, alone is real. Jagan Nitya. The phenomenal world is illusion, meaning the body, the prana, the feelings, the thoughts, any personal sense of self. And the world is not real. Don't worry. Don't sweat the small stuff, it's all small stuff. Run from the world, it's not horrible. It's just dreamlike. Keep the mind tuned up. Vairagya, that desire to give up attachment to all experiences gained through the senses and to renounce any personal sense of self, starting from the body up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator, meaning I think I'm important. And here we have to watch for enlightenment sickness. Am I enlightened yet? I think I know what do I have an awakened mind? Am I a powerful yogi now? Who has those stupid ideas? Don't be a knower of Brahman. Know that you are Brahman. Subtle difference. Have no concern for this shadow-like body, mind, intellect. One more.
सम्यग् विवेकः स्फुटबोधजन्यो विभज्य दृग्दृश्यपदार्थतत्त्वं छिन्नति मायाकृतमोहबन्धं यस्माद्विमुक्तस्य पुनर्न संसृतिः. Perfect discrimination arising from direct realization distinguishes the true nature of the subject from that of the object, when snaps the bond of delusion created by Maya, there is no more transmigration for one who has liberated himself from this.
So this is what need be done. Bring the mind into this state of supreme quiescence. Stop the mind and you stop the world. Then, when the mind returns from this, it reflects, oh, there's nobody there. Never was a person. How strange. Sure thought I was. But no. Vast and empty. An ocean of bliss. Ananda Sindhu. And if your mind extroverts, don't worry. So you remember to tune up again. Do it. Shankara says it. Swamiji says it. So far, I can tell you, it's true, it's true. It is the pearl of great price. It is the peace that passes all understanding. And Swamiji would say, meet me there. His eyes would just twinkle. Okay, we'll end here tonight. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.